I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, there is a lot of controversial thoughts about the interpretation of this verse. Does it mean that if you train a child a certain way, he will grow up and always be the way you trained him to be? Or if you just leave them to themselves, will they stay kind of crazy and undisciplined? Well, I would like to say because of the onslaught in the parenting world about corporal punishment, about discipline that exceeds certain limits, we have forgotten what training is about. Now, I'm wearing this medal, which is the first Chicago marathon that I ran. And I have a number of medals that I have secured running Chicago marathons, half marathons, 5Ks. I want to tell you that none of these races training for were particularly easy. You started out running for 10 minutes and feeling like, well, I can't go any further than this. But over time, through the training, you actually build stamina, strength, and endurance. Training for anything that is worthwhile is going to be important. And training a child is the same thing. It is not about being mean or trying to exert your stature over a child, because you want the child to be trained a certain way, just like everything else. You have to do the work, you have to be persevering, and you have to be willing to do the hard thing. For instance, if you're sitting on the couch watching your favorite program, it is so much easier to say to a bunch of kids upstairs getting into trouble, "Don't make me come up there," instead of actually going up there and intervening on whatever altercation is happening. Now, I would like to say a lot of times parenting can be really difficult. And part of the difficulty is because we're afraid of what other people might think of us. I'm remembering a time when one of my children, I won't say which one, but this particular child was walking down the street with me on Michigan Avenue. We had just left the Art Institute, and this child decided they didn't want to go any further. I said, "Come on, let's go, Lavinia." And she said no and threw herself on the ground and pitched a major fit. Well, I'm sure it only lasted 30 minutes, but it felt like 31. And so as I stood just watching her, I was looking around and seeing the look of other people looking at me, and I know they were thinking, that is a bad mom. And finally, seriously, it really wasn't that long, but it seemed like forever. Finally, she got tired and stood up and took my hand, and we went to catch the bus, which was now getting close to the stop we had to get to. And so, sisters, in exploring our ideals on child discipline, child raising, and child protective training in a way that is going to grow our child into a decent, honorable citizen and human being, what are some tips on how you would take care of your kids? Because frankly, I have seen a lot of parents that are so intimidated by their children that they are actually afraid of them. They are afraid to tell them no because they might throw a fit. They are afraid to hurry them up if they're trying to get somewhere because they're afraid that the kid is going to run in the other direction and then they can't catch them, or all kinds of ways. I've seen people put up with a lot of nonsense because they're actually afraid of their children. they are afraid of the conflict that their children are going to bring them. And I have to say, when I was a single woman and didn't have any kids, I too was one of those people that totally judge parents that let their kids throw a fit and didn't do anything except watch, like I did. So, sisters, are parents afraid of their children?
Well, I want to start out by saying that we were all better parents before we had children. Right? Right? We knew it all because we knew nothing. When we're going to explore a little bit on all kinds of fears. First, when they're little, to sometimes you're just afraid that you're going to lose control, but sometimes you're afraid of the judgment that's going to come. And some children, and I'm speaking especially for parents who may have children who have autism spectrum disorders or things like that, where the kids can be out of control and everyone is around them judging them. We need to give people a lot more grace than we actually do. But sometimes we're afraid because we want to be our children's friend. And yeah, you can be their friend. And by the way, Barbara, saying that not what kid that was and then saying her name was not helpful for her at all. But anyway, sometimes we want so much to be liked by our kids that that we will put up with some things, and we do get afraid of, oh, they're going to hold a grudge. Well, you know what, not even teenagers, who are the second range of toddlerhood, are going to hold a grudge for that long. And because they still need you. But the thing is that we need to stop being afraid to discipline, to guide, to train up our children. And yet we have to be afraid of harshness, of using violence, because that will come back to bite us, because those who live by the sword, we already know. So we have to start thinking about the consequences when we talk about fear. Yeah, sometimes our children are afraid of us, and sometimes we're afraid of our children, not so much of what they would do, but what other people are thinking. Naima, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. It's not so much when they're young, it's not so much us afraid of them, but afraid of the judgment of other people if we look like we're out of control, so to speak, of our children. And like you say, before we were parents, we were we were good parents before we had children. And I know I was very judgmental of parents who had children who had tantrums. It's you look at the parent like, oh, you don't know, your child doesn't care anything about you. They just disregard your authority. And you look at parents all kinds of ways when their child is acting out. Now that I understand that that's merely the child expressing their frustration at not being able to be understood or be heard,
Yeah.
or just feeling like that they can't communicate, and so that's the expression of their frustration. Now I understand that, so I'm not judgmental. But a lot of people are very judgmental of parents whose children may tend to throw tantrums if they don't get their way, and that can cause a parent then to overreact harshly and start beating a child. I mean, peer pressure exists. I don't care how old you are. So you can have the
Really?
peer pressure of older people watching you disapprovingly as your child is screaming and kicking. And then because of them, you then snatch up your child and start hitting them because you want these older parents to feel approval. I mean, I've seen that happen on a bus one time. Some little boy, he was just whining because he wanted to look out the window.
Yeah.
And the mother kept telling him to sit down, and he kept wanting to look out the window. And so, and I'm listening to, I'm watching the older people observing this. And then when she finally grabbed him and started beating him, and then he needs a little butt beat. Yeah, that's why I need to bring back spanking in school. I mean, I'm listening to this conversation with all these other people watching, and then they finally approved of her when she hit him. And I said, see, this is why peer pressure always makes you do wrong things.
Yes.
And it's the wrong kind of pressure, because those people, it's so funny because we're worried about this child is making me look bad.
That's it. That's what it is.
Like, I don't know what to do. I was in a restaurant once with a friend, and this was before I had kids, but he had a child who was throwing a little bit of a fit, and he gave her a lollipop and looked at me and said, "Sometimes it's better just to give them what they want." But and I sort of said, "Well, you just told her she couldn't have one, but now you're giving it to her. What are you teaching her? That if she screams and kicks and throws a fit, she will get what she wants?" And so there is a time and a place sometimes. I think, Cheryl, you and Naima had pretty good compliant children. I think I had some spirited kids that and I have to say, when they were little and there was a fight to sit by the window in the car, if it was going to be an hour-long trip to grandma's house or 3 hours to our other relatives in Moline, to not let there be any fights. Yes, I sat in the middle, in the back. This is before airbags and all this other stuff. And one child got to sit in the front next to Eric and look out the window. And the other two, Lorelei and John, each had a window. Well, my sister-in-law, she saw that and she said to me, "You're letting those kids control you." And I said, "No, I'm keeping there from being fights." And the thing that is so funny to me, this woman has 4 boys, and she told me she would never have herself fall into having to separate them by sitting in the backseat of a car. She is not going to give them that satisfaction. And then years later, when these 4 boys were a little bit more active, and I saw her when she was coming to visit us, and she's sitting in the back seat to separate those boys, I totally laughed. I totally told her she said that. She totally did not remember that she had.
Sure she didn't.
Yeah,
Sure
right.
she didn't.
Selective
Like I
amnesia.
said, we all are much better parents before we have children. And and Sarah had her days where she would be, her feelings would get too big for her to handle. And yeah, one time she screamed in my face and I did smack her. And then I felt terrible, but it was like such a reaction. I couldn't believe it. I apologized. Of course, she ran home and told her dad. But it was just too much. But it was like, but we all have grown up with this, they need the little butts beat. And we really need to get over that,
We have
because
to come up with better.
you know what happens to those little butts that got beat? They get older, and then all of a sudden you are facing off with a teenager who is going to square up.
And they're going to give you back what you did to them.
Because you are not hitting
Yeah.
them anymore, and they're not going to take it. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you are
You gotta
afraid.
do something else. 'Cause
Yeah,
they're not taking it anymore.
Yeah, they are not taking it anymore. And when I was at the Daily Item, we did a series. It was actually an award-winning series on elder abuse.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't come out of nowhere.
That is true.
No.
This comes from a lifetime of harsh punishment. And
Yeah.
of course, by the time your parents are elderly and you're frustrated and they're frustrated, maybe they have Alzheimer's or some other kind of cognition issues, which can make them quite mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the tables have turned.
Yeah.
So you are reaping what you sow, because you have become afraid of that child who's supposed to be your caregiver, and you still want your independence. See how that changed?
Yeah.
And I just recently, in the last couple of years, I read a story about someone, and it shocked me because I happen to know this person peripherally, and who had killed his mother.
Oh,
They found his mother at the bottom of the stairs. And like I said, this was somebody who I was familiar with. I didn't know, but this person was in my life, and I was shocked. I was just shocked. And so it can happen. This person, I'm sure he's in jail now. I hadn't heard what happened after the arrest. I don't know if he's up for trial or what. But the thing is that there is a lot of elder abuse that is out there. There's also a lot of abuse from parents and from teens. And you hear all the time about police being called, but domestic violence isn't always just the husband and the wife. Sometimes it's not just spouses. Sometimes it's parents
Children.
having to call over their children. Well, if you have always ruled by beating their little butt, when that little butt grows up,
Your big butt.
that big butt is going to be willing to say, you will not hit me again.
Now, real
And
quick,
see, that has become the thing that has totally stretched completely out of the ballpark what training is. It is not harshness or, beating, as you were saying, Cheryl, where a parent has gotten out of control. They don't have any other methods of training their child. And, well, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but rather sometimes it is painful. But later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. The magic word is training. And I think there are so many parenting courses, parenting classes. I taught parenting when I worked at a shelter. A lot of these women were single moms who had no other recourse but to wail on their kids. That was all they knew. That was all they were grown up with. That was all they had experienced. And to train them in patience, this is training the young parents, because these were a lot of young moms, to train them on how to see childishness as not necessarily rebellion. Knocking over milk is not them being mean. It's because their hands are small and they are not dexterous enough to be able to handle it. That's why you only fill the cup about a third of the way. Things that kids do, things that kids do are not always them being defiant. Sometimes it is just childishness, mischievousness, silliness, and a parent has to be able to know the difference. Sometimes the parents are kids themselves. They're so young that they don't really know how to handle training a child in the way they should go, training them how to respond to certain kinds of things that happen, training them how not to do the wrong thing, training them how to do the right thing, training them, not wailing on them to a place where you're never going to do this again. No, because we're not like that. We do the wrong thing over and over ourselves.
Well, you know what? Also, and you speak about people being young. You can be old, but yet immature. And a lot of times you have immaturity where a parent is feeling like, oh, you're not going to defy me. Like their ego is in it. This is a child. And children have a right to express anger because you have these emotions. So to punish them for having anger, that's not training them. What we have to do is teach them how to manage their anger so that their behavior is not
right.
And you can't train somebody how not to be destructive by being destructive yourself. So that means the parent has to have the maturity, like you said, Barbara, to see a child's behavior as just a child's behavior. It's childish behavior. It's on the level of their maturity, their emotional maturity. We can't turn around and be emotionally immature and teach them anything, because like you said, Cheryl, the tables turn and then you're going to get what you gave. So when they're 80 years old, they wet their pants because their bladder is weak, just like when they were 2 and they wet their pants. Well, did you beat them because you got frustrated having to change them? Well, look what's going to happen. Elder abuse. When they get to be that age and they do that same thing, when they have Alzheimer's, and it can be very challenging when someone is in the stage of dementia. And if you have not been patient as a parent, when your child was going through stages of mental development, and then should you, God forbid, but should you get to the stage where you have dementia and your child has to deal with you wetting your pants, not saying when you have to go to the bathroom, forgetting things, losing things, and they get frustrated and forget that you can't help it. And next thing you know, they're shaking you, they're screaming at you. Well, could be that's what you did to them. So
Well, because that's what they have learned when they are frustrated.
that's
And
what you do when you're frustrated. You scream, you
and
hit.
yeah, and that's the issue is that we need to understand how to deal with frustration.
Yes.
Right.
Tantrums are a normal part of development. And dementia is the flip side. I mean, that's not normal, but it is very common. And the thing is that you still can't, you can't fathom that this person is doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
They're not. Just like a
They're not
child
being on
isn't
purpose.
wetting the bed on purpose. And
Right.
so we have to put aside behaviors that we tend to think of and subscribe as spiteful. It's
Right,
like,
right. Children are
it's
spiteful.
not
They
it's
just
not spite. It's
frustrated and not
not.
spiteful.
And
That's
And
it.
I'm gonna throw this book up again. I know I keep showing it, but this book covers so many
Making children
different
monsters.
methods of dealing with children without you going into the crazy house yourself. Some of these things I thought, man, I wish I'd known some of this stuff when I was a
Yeah.
young parent, because the first child's always the experimental child. There was another one,
Yeah.
I think, by Tripp called
Keep that in
Shepherding the
mind.
Child's Heart, and that was another one on that really talked about training your child, helping them navigate those different emotions in a way that, I don't know, because I deal with children that have emotional and behavioral problems. We have learned that when they get upset and start throwing chairs and flipping desks, it's because something has upset them. And yes, their behavior is a little over the top and out of the ordinary, but we have learned different ways on how to master teaching them how to take a breath, go in the chill room, jump on the giant bean bag and beat it if you have to, things like that. And these are for kids that have behavioral problems. How much more for children that don't, but need a healthy avenue to navigate emotions that they can't handle well?
Yeah, definitely. You have to be able to control your own self as an adult. And we got a couple of comments here. Warren, thanks for joining us. He said this is a great topic. And Brian Vickers said it's a bad example. The parent that hits the child when they when they're out of order, setting a bad example. And of course, Brian says he's done that himself, just having to take a breath and take
there's
yourself away from, because the thing about it, if you are not of the maturity that you don't look at a child's misbehavior as challenging your authority or disrespecting you, then you will not be able to stay calm when a child is acting out. You will take it as a reflection of their respect for you, and then you'll feel compelled to be vengeful, which is not training. And that's what a lot of people are resorting to, because again, that's what they know, that's what they experience. Real quick, did any of you all see the movie Fences with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis?
Yes.
On the plane recently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
really cried. But that moment when his son said, "I'm not scared of you anymore," because
Yeah.
that happens.
And
That was bullying. His dad was bullying.
His father.
And there is also the thing of you being afraid when you're also afraid of your grown children, not even just for violence, but for abandonment. You are afraid, because at some point there's so many families who have become estranged from their children because their child has had to disengage because of the toxicity in that relationship.
Right.
So now you're afraid, you can't even ask your child for help because you've poisoned that nest for so long. that you
Yeah.
can't, and that's a different fear, that fear of abandonment, that fear of I'm going to die alone, or I don't have anybody to even take me to the doctors, or I have help here, or I've fallen and I can't get up and I can't call anyone.
Right.
And so there's all these kinds of fears. I want to quickly mention someone. I had mentioned him last week when we talked about your children being afraid of you. And I follow this young man on Instagram, and his name is Jamyle Cannon. And this, I'm going to spell it JAMYLECANNON. And he's a young
Demai.
father. He's got 2 kids now, and one is a toddler, and the other is a newborn or an infant. And he talks about his struggles about parenting. And I encourage you actually to follow him on Instagram and see how he engages in the things that he does. He's a very bright young man, a black father, and I had happened upon his Instagram, and I thought, he is really talking about when he has struggled with the tantrums, with the problems, and what he has done, and the things that have worked for him, the consequences that he's shown. So it's that gentle parenting that we have.
Yeah.
So we don't have to be afraid of our children later. We don't have to be afraid of abandonment. We don't have to be fearful of their emotions or of ours.
Right.
So I just want to put his name out there because he's somebody else that I follow, and I just found him very engaging, and he's learning as he goes, like the rest of us, because
Yeah.
it really
And that's
is. No
really
matter how many books, no matter how many books other people write, your child is going to be specific
it's
to
gonna
you.
be
Right.
Yeah.
To you.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
Brian-
And there's another one too that I follow, Raising Proud Black Children.
I've
You
seen
can
that
find
one.
them on Facebook. They discuss all kinds of issues, but particularly on their parenting spectrum, they talk about the Black experience and how to navigate away from that volatile way of dealing with our children.
Yes.
Yeah. We have to unlearn that because so many of us, that's all we knew. And Brian says the school system frustrates kids, so where they can learn, they can turn a child into learning disabled or a behavior disorder. And then that's true. A lot of times you get labeled just because you're expressing your frustration. That the
also we find that a lot of our Black children, especially our boys, are shunted into special education quicker. They are disciplined faster. They are giving a lot of things. So we can't take what is already that systemic racism and then practice it at home.
Absolutely. There it is. He said, by the way, a special education is a form of human warehousing. And like you say, a lot of times it's our male children that when a teacher gets frustrated at their energy, labels them, and then that label sticks, and that determines their whole school experience. So, like you said,
and there's another group that I follow, Black and Married with Kids, another group that talks about raising children in the atmosphere that we live in today.
That's a good one. Well, you all have gotten some great examples, some references. If you didn't get a chance to write them down, go back and play the video so you can write down these references, because we want everybody to be the best parent they can be so that you don't have to be afraid of your children. Well, make sure you follow us on Facebook, like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, 3 Black Moms. And until next week, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. We are 3 Black Moms. Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black Moms.